Ever feel like you're being watched, even when you're completely alone? In the backwoods of a forgotten town, there's this old cemetery where locals won't even drive by, not even in broad daylight. But at night, something stirs among the tombstones, and it ain't just the wind. This story comes from a former gravedigger who asked to remain anonymous. Said the things he saw there were so messed up, he had to quit the biz for good. But before we get started, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to hear will give you nightmares. It was October when the leaves are dying and the air feels heavy. St. Jerome Cemetery, founded way back in '87, always had a bad rap for being haunted. But nobody knew why until this guy, the new gravedigger, started working there. From the first day, he knew something was off. Birds never flew overhead. Dogs barked and bolted when they passed the gates. And at night, he'd hear whispers. Not clear voices, not shouts, just slurred words, like someone trying to talk through clenched teeth from under the ground. At first, he figured it was his imagination, burnout, suggestion, but then he noticed the whispers always came from the same tomb. A black marble mausoleum, off by itself in the oldest corner of the graveyard, covered in dead ivy and dark moss. Curious, and against all the rules, he decided to check it out. It was at the end of a shift just before midnight. Grabbed a flashlight, walked through the creaky gate and followed the gravel path to the spot. But as he got closer, the flashlight started to flicker, and that's when things got real. The flashlight sputtered, casting weird shadows on the headstones. The gravedigger took a deep breath, trying to stay focused. But there was something in the air, a sickly sweet, rotten smell, like meat left out in the sun.
He reached the black mausoleum. The name on the tombstone had been partly eaten away by time. Only the letters A.M. were still readable. The dead ivy seemed to have grown into the cracks in the marble, like it was holding something, trapped inside. As he got closer, the whispers became clearer. Now they were joined by dry, rhythmic knocks coming from inside the crypt. Knock. 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 3 times. Then silence. 3 more knocks. Then a long pause. And then a slurred whisper. Let me out. The gravedigger froze. His gut was screaming at him to run, but something held him back. Maybe it was curiosity, or something darker, pulling him into that darkness. He went back the next day with tools, telling himself he was doing preventative maintenance. The real goal? Open the mausoleum. When he removed part of the marble lid, he found a second layer of wood, sealed with strange symbols carved into rusty nails. Symbols that didn't belong to any religion he knew. The wood looked new, even though the tomb was over a century old. When he finally pulled off the lid, he found no bones, no dust. The crypt was empty. But there was something written on the inside walls, a single sentence, repeated in tiny letters, like someone had scratched it with their own fingernails. The forgotten must sleep. The forgotten must sleep. The forgotten must sleep. He went home in silence, but that night was the worst. While he slept, he dreamed he was inside the crypt, not as a visitor, as a prisoner. He felt the weight of the earth on his chest, heard footsteps above him, and every second it was like something was crawling closer to his soul. He woke up sweaty, trembling, and with dirt under his fingernails. At work, he avoided looking at the mausoleum, but the whispers didn't stop. They got worse. Now they came during the day. Even his co-workers started to notice. One of them even said, "Did you hear that? Sounds like someone's calling us." Afraid of sounding crazy, the gravedigger made up some story about leaking pipes. But every day, the stuff got bolder. Tools disappeared. Newly filled graves appeared open. Candles left by visiting families were found melted into twisted shapes, looking like screaming faces. And then, something impossible happened. On Thursday morning, when he arrived for work, the marble mausoleum was completely sealed again, like it had never been opened. No cracks, no broken moss, nothing. But now there was something new. Nailed to the front of the tomb was an iron cross he'd never put there, and hanging from it, a handwritten note. "You woke the forgotten. Now it wakes in you." The gravedigger started losing sleep. The voice from the mausoleum invaded his thoughts. At random moments, he heard the whisper behind his neck, even in public places. And every time he passed a mirror, his reflection was a second late, like he was being mimicked, not reflected. You still with me? If you've made it this far, drop a comment with "The Forgotten Saw Me" and give it a dark like to support the channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, be careful. They say if you ignore stories like this, you attract the kind of attention you don't want. The town heard about the story. Rumors spread like wildfire. The gravedigger quit weeks later, claiming mental health issues, but it wasn't crazy. Not completely, because the tomb is still there, and sometimes when the autumn winds blow through the tombstones, locals say they hear dry knocks. Knock, 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 followed by a whisper, "Let me out." Sleepless nights became routine for the gravedigger. Every shadow seemed to come alive, every whisper more urgent and desperate, until one night he decided to face whatever was haunting him once and for all. He returned to the cemetery alone, armed only with an old flashlight and shaky courage. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the wind cut like a razor. Footsteps echoed among the tombstones, but they weren't his. An unbearable cold enveloped him, as if death itself had come down to collect him. As he approached the black mausoleum, the iron cross shone under the dim light of the flashlight. And then he heard the voice, clearly this time. A whisper that was almost a scream. "Please, let me out before it's too late." The gravedigger hesitated. Fear gripped his chest, but something inside him drove him to open the tomb again. As he removed the cross, the ground around him began to shake. A foul, damp smell filled the air, mixed with the sound of creaking bones. The lid of the mausoleum was no longer just marble and wood. It seemed alive, pulsating, as if the cemetery itself were breathing. He opened the lid, and a cold wind escaped from within, carrying with it a black fog that almost made him faint. Inside the crypt, something moved. A hand, pale, thin, covered in dirt, emerged slowly, followed by an entire arm. The figure that emerged was not human, but something corrupted by earth, time, and an ancient curse. It was the Forgotten One, a soul trapped between worlds, condemned to wait centuries for liberation. Its empty eyes burned with a mixture of pain and rage. The gravedigger recoiled, but the creature advanced. A silent scream filled the night, and the headstones around began to shake, as if the cemetery itself were awakening from a deep sleep. The voice of the Forgotten One echoed in his mind. "You opened the door. Now I can walk among the living." The creature stretched its hands towards the gravedigger, who felt a cold that seemed to penetrate to his bones. For a moment he thought his soul would be sucked into that abyss of darkness. But then a faint light appeared. The sunrise was approaching. The black fog began to recede, and the creature let out a final sigh of agony before disappearing into the earth, sealing the mausoleum behind it. Silence fell over the cemetery, heavy and absolute. The gravedigger fell to his knees, exhausted, feeling that something inside him had changed forever. The first rays of sunlight filtered timidly through the trees of the cemetery. The air seemed lighter, but the gravedigger knew that nothing would be the same after that night. He went home, but the silence was deceptive. Something inside him seemed different, as if the shadow of the Forgotten One had taken root in his own soul. In the following days, he avoided the cemetery, trying to erase everything from his mind. But then he began to notice small details. The clock on the kitchen wall was inexplicably slow. His dreams were invaded by images of the crypt, of hands reaching out to him, of voices calling him. And the strangest thing, a mark, an ancient symbol like those rusty nails, had appeared on the back of his hand. He tried to scratch it off, but the mark did not disappear. It was a reminder, a curse, or a warning. On the last night, looking out the window, he saw a figure standing at the cemetery gate, a dark shape, motionless, watching. And he understood that the Forgotten One had not been freed. It had found a new home. The story ends with a deep silence, interrupted only by a whisper, almost inaudible. You're never alone. If you liked it, hit that like button, share it with anyone who's into creepy stories, and comment, "The Forgotten will never leave me."